Hey there, fellow deep divers. Today we're stepping into a time machine, but instead of going back, we're hurtling forward. We're going to be looking at how our everyday jobs, our occupations, could evolve in the future. A future that's more balanced, more just, and way more awesome.
It's like getting a sneak peek into a world where work isn't just about punching the clock, but about actually contributing to a society that works for everyone. And our guidebook for this journey is P.R. Sarkar's Discourses on Various Occupations.
Discourses on various occupations sounds pretty serious, but also kind of cool. So what's the core idea here?
Well, Sarkar had this really fascinating concept called vritti, which is way more than just a job title. It's your occupation, yes, but it's also about what sustains you physically, mentally, and even spiritually. It's about how your work feeds your whole being.
Oh, wow, that's deep. So it's not just about bringing home the bacon, but also about finding work that nourishes our minds and spirits?
Exactly. But here's where it gets really, really thought-provoking. Sarkar argues that our different occupations, the very things that are supposed to sustain us, can actually create divisions and what he calls groupist mentalities.
Groupist mentalities. I've never heard that term before. What does he mean by that?
It's like we get stuck in our own professional bubbles. Doctors hang out with doctors, lawyers with lawyers, and so on. We start thinking in terms of us versus them, forgetting that we're all part of the same human fabric.
Okay, I see what he's getting at. It's like how some people identify too strongly with their job title that it becomes their whole identity. But Sarkar believes we can move beyond that.
He does. And he calls this transcending force spiritual idealism. It's about recognizing the human being first, regardless of their profession, and seeing the interconnectedness of all things.
I love that idea. Breaking down those barriers and building a more unified society is giving me hope for the future already. But tell me, how does all of this apply to specific professions? I'm dying to know what Sarkar envisions for the lawyers, doctors, and business people of the future.
Oh, he has some fascinating and sometimes surprising ideas about that. Let's start with the lawyers.
Oh, lawyers. They always seem to get a bad rap. What does Sarkar have to say about them?
Well, he starts with this provocative statement. It is a popular allegation, and let's be honest, not entirely untrue, that lawyers thrive on disputes.
Ouch. I bet that stings for any lawyers listening. But is there any truth to that? Do some lawyers actually benefit from conflict?
To illustrate his point, Sarkar tells this great story about a lawyer in India who was actually upset about the decrease in litigation after land reform.
Wait, seriously? The lawyer was sad that there were fewer lawsuits. That's wild.
It is. It shows how our occupations can really shape our thinking, even to the point where we might resist positive change if it threatens our livelihood.
That's a really powerful point. It makes you think about your own profession and how it might be influencing your perspective. But I'm struggling with this idea that some lawyers might actually benefit from conflict. How does Sarkar reconcile that with the need for justice?
Well, he does acknowledge that lawyers play a crucial role in protecting the innocent and ensuring fairness. He's not saying all lawyers are bad, but he's challenging us to think about how we might create a system where their role isn't so deeply intertwined with conflict.
Okay, so we can't just throw out lawyers altogether. They do serve an important purpose. But how do we address this potential conflict of interest?
Sarkar suggests exploring alternative systems like arbitration or village councils, but with a fascinating twist. He proposes that instead of elected officials, these councils should be comprised of appointed experts.
Appointed experts. That's an interesting idea. Why does he suggest that?
He believes that experts chosen for their knowledge and impartiality would be less likely to be swayed by biases or political pressures. It's about ensuring that decisions are made based on fairness and reason, not just popularity or personal gain.
I see his point. It's about prioritizing competence and integrity over political maneuvering. So what about all those lawyers who end up in politics? Is that genuine public service, or are they just looking for a new arena to argue in?
That's a great question. And Sarkar acknowledges that there's a lot of cynicism surrounding lawyers in politics, this idea that they're just power hungry or looking for a backup career.
Yeah, I think we've all heard those jokes. But does Sarkar think they're all bad apples?
Not at all. He offers a more compassionate perspective, suggesting that some lawyers might turn to politics out of a genuine desire to serve the public, or even out of economic necessity if they're struggling to find work in law.
That's a good reminder to not stereotype an entire profession. Not all lawyers turned politicians are secretly plotting to take over the world. But if we have too many lawyers, as Sarkar suggests, what's the solution?
He proposes a pretty bold shift in our educational priorities. He suggests prioritizing science and technology first, then commerce, then the arts. with law being a highly selective specialization, almost like the Ivy League of the future.
So fewer lawyers overall, but those who do enter the field would be the best and brightest, truly dedicated to justice.
Exactly. It's about creating a system where the legal profession attracts those who are genuinely passionate about serving others, not just those looking for a lucrative career path.
Now, that's a future I can get behind.
Yeah.
Fewer lawsuits and more justice. Sign me up. But speaking of professions that are supposed to be dedicated to serving others, I'm curious to hear what Sarkar has to say about doctors. He doesn't think we should all just be relying on essential oils and crystals, does he?
Huh. Well, his views on medicine are definitely nuanced. He doesn't dismiss any system outright, but he does offer some pretty sharp critiques. And he kicks things off with a Sanskrit proverb that's both shocking and kind of funny. If one kills 100 people, one may qualify as a quack, but if one kills 1,000 people, one can qualify to be a doctor.
Whoa, that's dark. Is he suggesting doctors are just glorified serial killers? I'm getting a little nervous about my next checkup.
Don't worry, he's not saying all doctors are out to get us. But he is highlighting the fact that medicine in the wrong hands can be harmful. It's a powerful reminder that we shouldn't blindly trust anyone in a white coat.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. But why does he focus on this idea of killing? What's he trying to convey?
He's using a bit of hyperbole to emphasize the potential for harm if medicine is misused or if practitioners aren't skilled and compassionate. He's also pointing to the fact that there's a history of medical experimentation and even exploitation that we shouldn't just brush aside.
That makes sense. We tend to put doctors on a pedestal, but they're human, just like everyone else, and capable of making mistakes.
Exactly. And this leads to another one of Sarkar's key points. Medicine, at its core, should be a form of social service, not a business. Patients are often vulnerable and desperate, which makes them easy targets for exploitation.
That's a crucial point. When profit becomes the primary motive, the well-being of the patient can take a back seat. So what's the solution? Should we all become medical experts overnight? I can barely handle a common cold.
Huh. No need to go to med school just yet. But Sarkar does encourage us to be more discerning patients. He wants us to think critically about different medical systems and not blindly trust anyone in a white coat. He wants us to ask questions, to our research, and find healthcare providers who align with our values.
Okay, so walk me through it. What are some of the different medical systems Sarkar discusses, and what are his thoughts on each?
He covers a wide range from allopathy and Ayurveda to Hakimi homeopathy and naturopathy. And he doesn't shy away from pointing out the potential downsides of each.
Ooh, this is getting juicy. Let's start with a big one. Allopathy. That's the dominant system in most of the world, right?
Right. It's what most of us are familiar with. And Sarkar points out that while it's made incredible advances, it also has some potential pitfalls, like the over-reliance on strong medicines, the risk of misdiagnosis, and the often unpleasant side effects.
I think we've all experienced those side effects.
Yeah.
I once took a medication that made me feel worse than the actual illness.
Exactly. And that's why Sarkar stresses the importance of being aware of the potential risks and benefits of any treatment, regardless of the system.
So it's about being informed and making conscious choices, not just blindly following what a doctor prescribes. What about Ayurveda and Hakimi? I'm not as familiar with those systems.
They're traditional systems of medicine from India that, like allopathy, rely on potent substances, some of which can be quite strong or even poisonous. Sarkar acknowledges their potential benefits, but he also cautions against misdiagnosis and the potential overuse of powerful substances.
Okay, so it's not about favoring one system over another, but about understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each. What about homeopathy? That's one of those tiny sugar pills, right?
Right. And Sarkar notes that homeopathy, with its focus on the individual patient's symptoms and its use of subtle doses, can be a gentler approach minimizing the risk of harsh side effects. But he also points out that there's a potential for slackness and a lack of proficiency among homeopathic practitioners.
So even a system that seems gentle on the surface can have its downsides. What about naturopathy? That seems like the most natural and least invasive approach.
It does, and Sarkar acknowledges that harnessing nature's healing power can be incredibly effective. But he also raises practical concerns about its accessibility and affordability. Not everyone has the means to follow specialized diets or afford expensive naturopathic treatments.
That's a really good point. Access and affordability are often overlooked when we talk about healthcare. So if no system is perfect, how do we navigate this complex world of medicine? It's enough to make your head spin.
Well, Sarkar stresses the importance of something that's often overlooked in conventional medicine: the patient's mindset and faith in the healing process.
So it's not just about the pills and procedures, but about our mental and emotional state.
Absolutely. He believes that medicine, no matter the system, is simply aiding nature's inherent healing power. And a patient's belief and trust in their doctor can play a huge role in their recovery.
That makes a lot of sense. A positive attitude and a strong doctor-patient relationship can work wonders.
Exactly. And that's why Sarkar highlights the importance of doctors' and nurses' conduct in fostering that trust and inspiring hope. It's not just about being clinically competent, but also about being compassionate and understanding.
So bedside manner really does matter.
Mm.
We want doctors who are not just skilled, but also genuinely care about their patients.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, Sarkar doesn't shy away from the darker side of the medical profession. He talks about corruption, black market dealings, and mistreatment of patients, and how these issues often stem from systemic problems and a focus on profit over people.
Ugh, that's heavy stuff. It's a reminder that even professions dedicated to healing aren't immune to greed and exploitation. But does Sarkar offer any solutions? Any hope for a better future for medicine?
He does. He concludes with a powerful call to action stating that transforming people into genuine human beings is the ultimate solution. It's about cultivating compassion ethics and a sincere desire to serve others, not just profit from their suffering.
I love that. More humanity in healthcare. It's a beautiful vision. And it's not just the responsibility of doctors and nurses, right? We all have a role to play in creating a more just and equitable healthcare system.
Exactly. It's a collective effort involving individuals, communities, and society as a whole. It's about shifting our values and prioritizing the well-being of all.
That's a future I can get behind. Speaking of shifting values, let's move on to another profession that Sarkar has some strong opinions about. Business people. He even goes so far as to compare them to, wait for it, refined criminals.
That's quite a statement. It definitely grabs your attention, doesn't it? But before we jump to conclusions, let's explore what he really means by that rather provocative label.
Okay, I'm ready to hear him out. But I'm also ready to defend the good guys out there. Not all business people are heartless monsters, right?
Of course not. And Sarkar acknowledges that. He doesn't believe that all business is inherently dishonest.
Phew. I was getting a little worried there.
Oh.
But I have a feeling there's a but coming.
There is. He argues that while it's possible to run an honest business, it's rarely the path to rapid wealth.
Ah, there's the rub. Honesty and quick riches don't always go hand in hand. Does he elaborate on why that is?
He offers a fascinating historical perspective, taking us back to ancient India and the Vaishya caste, who were responsible for commerce. He points out that back then, there were safeguards in place to prevent excessive greed and hoarding.
Interesting. So they had rules to keep the super greedy in check. Tell me more.
He cites Chanakya, a renowned philosopher and advisor, who actually recommended some pretty radical measures for dealing with those whose wealth threatened the well-being of the state.
Okay, radical measures. I'm picturing public shaming and confiscating all their gold.
Not quite that dramatic, but Chanakya did suggest that kings should heavily tax the excessively wealthy or even remove them from their positions of power if they posed a threat to society. It was all about maintaining balance and ensuring the collective good.
Wow, that's a pretty strong stance. So how do today's business people measure up to those ancient standards?
Well, Sarkar paints a rather grim picture. He argues that many of today's business people, driven by materialism and a thirst for profit, are more like pishachaftas.
Pishachaftas. What in the world is that?
It translates to ghouls.
Ghouls. Yikes. That's a pretty scary image. What's he getting at with that comparison?
He's using a powerful image from mythology to suggest that these business people are feeding off the suffering of others, exploiting them for their own personal gain. It's a harsh critique, but it forces us to confront the dark side of unchecked greed.
I see why he called them refined criminals. But is there any hope for redemption in Sarkar's view? Are all business people destined to become ghouls?
Not necessarily. He calls for a middle path, a way of doing business that doesn't harm the honest aspects of society. It's not about compromise, but about finding a balance between profit and ethical conduct.
That sounds like a tall order. How do we even begin to create a system that doesn't incentivize greed and exploitation?
Well, Sarkar has some pretty specific ideas about how to restructure our economic systems to promote fairness and prevent the accumulation of excessive wealth in the hands of a few.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's dive into those ideas.
Well, Sarkar starts with the essentials: food, clothing, fuel, the very foundations of a functioning and thriving society, right?
Absolutely. You can't have a happy and productive society if people are hungry, cold, and can't even turn on the lights. So how does Sarkar propose we handle those crucial elements?
He advocates for a system where production is primarily in the hands of those who actually do the work, farmers and producers, cooperatives. And when it comes to getting those goods to the people who need them, consumers cooperatives should be calling the shots.
Cooperatives, cooperatives, cooperatives. That seems to be a recurring theme with Sarkar. What's the big deal with cooperatives anyway? Why does he think they hold the key to a more just economic system?
Well, think about it. Cooperatives are all about collaboration and shared ownership. It's not about a few individuals hoarding profits, but about everyone having a stake in the success of the enterprise. This leads to a more equitable distribution of wealth and a system where everyone benefits.
Okay, that makes sense. When everyone has a piece of the pie, there's less incentive to exploit others or hoard resources. Plus, I can see how consumers having a voice in distribution could help prevent things like price gouging and shortages. But I'm curious about Sarkar's stance on land ownership. Doesn't he think farmers should own their own land?
This is where Sarkar's perspective might surprise you. He actually argues that individual land ownership can be detrimental.
Really? Why is that? I mean, owning land is often seen as the ultimate dream, a symbol of freedom and independence.
That's true, but Sarkar sees it from a different angle. He argues that individual ownership can actually hinder progress. It can lead to inefficient use of resources, potential for waste, and difficulty in implementing modern techniques. Imagine trying to coordinate a large-scale irrigation project when the land is divided up amongst dozens of different owners, all with their own agendas.
That does sound like a logistical nightmare. So what does he propose instead? Government ownership of all land? That seems a bit extreme, doesn't it?
Sarkar takes an even bolder stance. He believes that land is the common property of humanity. No single individual or entity should have absolute ownership over it. It belongs to all of us.
Whoa, that's a radical idea.
Yeah.
It makes you rethink the whole concept of ownership. But if no one owns land, who gets to decide how it's used? Who manages it?
Sarkar envisions a system where the responsibility for preserving and utilizing land falls on local governments working through producers' cooperatives to ensure that it's being used wisely and sustainably.
Okay, so it's about collective stewardship rather than individual control. It's about recognizing that land is a precious resource that needs to be managed for the benefit of all. Does this logic apply to other essential commodities too, like reading materials, basic necessities, and medicines?
Absolutely. Sarkar extends this principle of collective stewardship to all the essentials required for a dignified life. These things, he argues, should be produced and distributed in a way that prioritizes the well-being of all, not the profits of a few.
So we're talking about a system that ensures everyone has access to food, shelter, healthcare, education, all the things that allow us to live fulfilling lives. It's about creating a safety net that catches everyone, not just those who are lucky enough to be born into wealth.
Precisely. It's about creating a system where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their background or circumstances.
But where do business people fit into all this? Are they completely out of the picture in Sarkar's vision?
Not entirely. Sarkar sees a role for business people in the realm of non-essentials and luxury items. He believes that by focusing their energies on these areas, the potential for exploitation is reduced, as the essentials are already being taken care of through cooperatives and autonomous bodies.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So essential goods and services are handled collectively, ensuring that everyone's basic needs are met, while business people can focus on providing those nice-to-have items that make life a little more enjoyable. But what about areas that can't be easily managed by cooperatives, like the production of medicines or the management of complex financial systems?
Sarkar advocates for the creation of autonomous bodies to handle these crucial areas. These bodies, composed of experts and guided by ethical principles, would ensure quality, prevent exploitation, and maintain a focus on social service rather than profit.
So we're talking about a hybrid system, with cooperatives, autonomous bodies, and private enterprise, all playing a role, but with safeguards in place to prevent any one group from having too much power or exploiting others. Does he suggest autonomous bodies for any other industries?
Yes. He specifically mentions banks. He believes they should not be left solely in the hands of private business people because of the risk of mismanagement and the potential for people to lose their savings. We've all seen what happens when banks prioritize profit over responsibility. It can lead to economic chaos and widespread suffering.
Absolutely. When banks collapse, it's not just the wealthy investors who suffer, it's everyday people who lose their homes, their livelihoods, and their sense of security. It's crucial to have a system that prioritizes stability and protects people's hard-earned money. So if we're minimizing private enterprise in essential areas and maximizing the role of cooperatives and autonomous bodies, how does that impact the role of government?
Well, in Sarkar's vision, the role of government is transformed, becoming less about top-down control and more about facilitating and supporting these new economic structures. He envisions a much more decentralized system where local governments and autonomous bodies have more control over production and distribution. This, he believes, would lead to a more responsive and accountable system as decisions would be made closer to the people they affect.
That's a really compelling idea. It's about empowering communities to take control of their own economic destinies. And it also creates a more direct link between the government and the people, fostering a sense of trust and shared responsibility. But before we get too carried away with restructuring the entire world, let's explore another profession that Sarkar has some insightful thoughts on: actors and artists. I'm all ears.
Well, he begins by making a clear distinction between genuine artists, those who uplift the human spirit and inspire us with beauty and truth, and those who exploit art for profit, turning it into just another commodity to be bought and sold.
It seems like that distinction applies to any profession, doesn't it? There are always going to be those who are driven by passion and purpose, and those who are just in it for the money. But what makes art unique in Sarkar's view?
He believes that the true goal of art is to awaken something deep within us. It's about inspiring benevolence, expanding our consciousness, and revealing the interconnectedness of all things. It's not just entertainment, it's a pathway to personal and societal transformation.
That's beautiful. It's like art is a mirror reflecting our own potential back to us, inspiring us to become better, more compassionate human beings. But let's be real. In the world we live in, art often does involve money. Artists have to make a living somehow. How does Sarkar reconcile this practical reality with his lofty vision of art as a transformative force?
That's a great question. And Sarkar acknowledges that true artists often struggle financially, while those who prioritize profit over artistic integrity seem to thrive. It's a frustrating paradox. But he believes we can create a system where artistic expression and financial well-being aren't mutually exclusive.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does he propose we do that?
He suggests, once again, a system of collective ownership and management. He believes that theaters, cinemas, and other art venues should be owned and operated by local autonomous bodies, ensuring that artists are fairly compensated and have the resources they need to create.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. Autonomous bodies seem to be his go-to solution for creating a more just and equitable society. But in this case, would artists still have creative control over their work? Or would they be at the mercy of these autonomous bodies?
Sarkar emphasizes that artists should retain full creative control over their work. The autonomous bodies would handle the business side of things, ensuring fair compensation, providing pensions, and managing the venues. Artists would be free to create and express themselves without being beholden to market forces or the whims of wealthy patrons.
That sounds like a dream come true for artists. Creative freedom and financial security. Where do I sign up?
But Sarkar doesn't stop there. He recognizes that artists, by their very nature, are often sensitive and deeply in touch with their emotions. This can make them vulnerable to certain challenges.
Yeah, I can see that. Artists often pour their hearts and souls into their work, and that can leave them feeling exposed and even a bit raw. What does Sarkar suggest we do to support artists in this regard?
He emphasizes the importance of strong character and ethical conduct, especially given the influence artists have on young people. He believes that artists have a responsibility to live their values, not just portray them in their art.
So it's not just about creating beautiful art, it's about living a life that embodies those same values of beauty, truth, and goodness. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And what if an artist fails to live up to those values? What if their personal conduct contradicts their artistic message? Well, Sarkar has a rather controversial suggestion for that.
Ooh, controversial. I'm on the edge of my seat. What does he propose?
He believes that immoral artists should be barred from performing, at least temporarily, and potentially even sent to reform schools to help them get back on track.
Whoa. Reform schools for artists? That seems pretty extreme. Isn't that a bit like censorship?
It's definitely a thought-provoking idea. And it shows how seriously Sarkar takes the role of art and the responsibility that comes with wielding that kind of influence. He believes that art has the power to shape society, and those who create it should use that power wisely and ethically.
It's definitely a conversation starter. Makes you think about the delicate balance between artistic freedom and social responsibility. Well, this has been another fascinating deep dive. I always learn so much from these conversations.
Me too. And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to create a future where our occupations contribute to a more just equitable and fulfilling world for everyone.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on quite a journey today exploring P.R. Sarkar's bold vision for the future of occupations. From lawyers and doctors to business people and artists, he's challenged us to rethink our relationship with work and imagine a world where our jobs contribute to something much bigger than just our own individual success.
It's been an eye-opening exploration, hasn't it? Sarkar's ideas might seem radical at first, but they offer a refreshing perspective on how we can create a society that prioritizes collective well-being, ethical conduct, and a sense of shared responsibility.
Absolutely. It's like he's given us a blueprint for a future where work isn't just about earning a paycheck, but about contributing to something meaningful, something that benefits everyone. But before we wrap up, I'd love to recap some of the key takeaways from Sarkar's vision. There's so much to unpack.
Well, one of the central themes that runs through all of his ideas is this shift from individual profit to collective well-being. Whether we're talking about cooperatives, autonomous bodies, or a more decentralized approach to governance, Sarkar emphasizes the importance of shared ownership, collaboration, and a focus on service rather than personal gain.
It's about moving away from that every man for himself mentality that seems to dominate so much of our current system. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together and that our individual success is intertwined with the well-being of the whole.
Exactly. And this shift requires a fundamental transformation in our thinking, a move away from greed and exploitation towards compassion, and a genuine desire to contribute to the betterment of society.
It's a tall order, but I think it's a vision worth striving for. A world where our occupations are a source of fulfillment, not just a means to an end. A world where we work together to create a society that works for everyone.
It's a powerful vision, and while some of Sarkar's ideas may seem unconventional or even challenging to implement, they offer a valuable framework for rethinking our relationship with work and envisioning a more just and equitable future.
I think what resonates with me the most is this idea of work as a form of service. It's about seeing our occupations not just as ways to earn a living, but as opportunities to contribute our unique talents and skills to the betterment of society.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about finding that sweet spot where our passions align with the needs of the world, where our work becomes an expression of our values and a source of genuine fulfillment.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what does it all mean for us here and now? How can we take these inspiring ideas and apply them to our own lives and careers?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And ultimately, it's a question that each of us must answer for ourselves. But here's a thought-provoking question to ponder as you move forward. What steps can you take within your own sphere of influence to move towards a future where occupations contribute to the well-being of all?
It's a powerful question, and one that I hope will stay with our listeners long after they finish listening. It's about recognizing that we all have the power to create change, even in small ways. It's about making conscious choices about the work we do, the companies we support, and the values we embody in our everyday lives.
Exactly. It's about shifting our focus from what's in it for me to how can I make a positive impact. It's about remembering that we're all interconnected and that the choices we make today will shape the world of tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the future of occupations. We hope it's inspired you to rethink your own relationship with work and to envision a future where our jobs contribute to a more just, equitable, and fulfilling world for everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to make a difference.